Again, Charlie Goldsmith put out a lot of talking points from Reds camp early. And we, of course, talked about Matt McLain. It wasn't a question mark, but it was more curiosity. Like, I think Matt McLain was always going to be the Reds' second baseman, but I think we were kind of curious, how much of the noise from the offseason where there was a lot of talks of potentially, getting him some time in the outfield, how much of that would have played a role in his usage throughout the upcoming season. Matt McLain will be focusing on second base. He could take some ground balls at shortstop, but second is his primary focus, and this is according to, of course, Terry Francona. So we talked about that. Gavin Lux, as Jacob talked about a little bit ago as well, another update from Charlie Goldsmith regarding his conversation with Terry Francona. Gavin Lux will likely play second and third early in camp. At first, they'll look at him there, and they will not add outfield. Of course, Gavin Lux being brought in just to, again, the versatility that he brings to the table, of course, being able to play middle infield. And although there's guys that you have set there that you're primarily looking at, second baseman, shortstop, third base, this, that, and the other, we thought we had it all figured out last year and then realized, we're actually not as deep in middle infield as what we thought. So I think having a guy that could play second, short, and third is going to be key for Lux as he kind of bounces around a bit. But if we know that McLean's your second baseman, you obviously know that Ellie's your shortstop. Third base seems to be the big question mark at this point. Noelvi Marte, who we've talked a lot about, not always in the way that we had anticipated or hoped. Not a whole lot of positivity coming out from any updates when it comes to him. But Candelario is another name to keep an eye on as well, because Terry Francona praised Candelario for how he looks heading into camp. But one of the best, said the best shape he's been in his career, which is good for Candelario's bid to play third base. So if Matt McLain's at second, and of course you have Ellie at short, and if Candelario's at third, where does Gavin Lux fit in to the mix here? Because I know they said they're not even looking to put him in the outfield, but will that be the spot that they have to look at some point? What if there is a logjam in middle infield, which is a good problem to have considering what we saw last year?
Yeah, I mean, Gavin Lux is a guy that I did not think, and I still don't really think, is going to be a massive difference maker for this team. I could be wrong. I like Gavin Lux, but I don't think he should be like someone you're relying upon to bring in 100 runs, some guy that you're relying upon to be an everyday player. Like, this is a guy that's going to fill in spots when he's needed, and that's why you bring him here. He's a utility guy. He'll play every position in the infield. I imagine they're going to force him out in the outfield as well. So he's going to play everywhere. You're going to see him everywhere. I don't think he's going to be an everyday starter. I can't imagine that's going to be the case. So I thought that when they signed him. I didn't like that's just not a guy that you start right there at first base or shortstop or third base. It's just not a guy you start. Now I could be wrong on that. Like, an injury happens and he takes over a spot, and that's his spot for the rest of the year. Kind of the way it happened last year with Jonathan India. A lot of people thought India was going out to the outfield. Well, no, Matt McLain. India just goes back to second. So if there's another injury situation, that's where Lux will take over. I think Lux is going to be an important piece. I just don't think he's going to be the most important piece, not by a long shot.
Yeah, we traded Jonathan India for Brady Singer, which greatly improved our rotation. Then we traded next to nothing for Gavin Lux, who's a marginally better Jonathan India for that utility role off the bench. I don't think Gavin Lux is going to be an everyday player. I think Elliott's absolutely right. I may have jumped the gun a little bit mentally on the whole right field thing, outfield thing. As soon as we made the trade, I think everyone got pretty optimistic on that right away. But it doesn't seem like he's going to be an everyday guy, and I think that's okay. To have Gavin Lux coming off the bench and have that considerable depth in the middle infield in case one of those injuries happen, you can stay above water for a few games or a month or whatever it is, as long as it's not something that's super significant and keeps a guy out for a long time. A player like Gavin Lux on your bench can absolutely keep you afloat. And if Jeimer Candelario, if his injuries start acting up again and he can't play defensively, he gives you the ability to play him at DH and play Lux at third. And you don't have to put as much on Noelvi Marte's plate, when I don't think anyone in this organization or fans of it have a lot of faith in him going into this season. So I think it gives you a little bit longer leash, which with a lot of stuff in terms of staying competitive this year across the infield and up and down your lineup. But yeah, maybe he, shines in the infield and they move him to the outfield later in spring training and he looks great out there too, and we get really lucky and have an everyday guy. But if he's not, I still think he can be an absolutely crucial piece to this team when it comes to winning games and, staying in the mix when it comes, down the line when guys are banged up.
Yeah, and to be able to, and again, having depth, having guys, on that bench that could play multiple spots in the infield. This is where I don't mind having, like, when you go sign guys that can play multiple positions, I don't mind that, as long as you're not signing Gavin Lux to say, hey, this is our one of our starting middle infielders moving forward. I don't get all the butterflies inside for that, because as I've said before, do you want a guy that can specifically play third base and is not very good at other positions, but he's an elite third baseman, or do you want a guy that could be an average second baseman, shortstop, and third baseman? Obviously, you see the value for a team that doesn't spend a lot of money like the Reds to see more value in a Gavin Lux than going all out, all in, if you will, to spend on an expensive third baseman or any other position player in the middle infield. I get both sides to that equation. Gavin Lux, though, because he's not going to be a primary everyday player, I think does check off a lot of boxes because of that and the value he brings to the table. And then Noelvi Marte, let's just say that, okay, he does have a good spring training and everything is clicking and it's rolling for him. That's another piece inside, because, again, you have Matt McLain who could play second base or short. You have, obviously, Lux who could play second, short, or third in that situation. You have Candelario at third. You have Noelvi Marte at third. Like, you have a lot of options now in that middle infield to move pieces around, obviously with different lineups. If injuries occur, you need to give, Elly De La Cruz that rare off day, and you hope it's not often, but know that it's needed throughout. They're going to have options. They didn't have a lot of options last year. They're going to have options this year. Again, assuming everyone's healthy, I feel pretty good about the way things are shaking up early. But again, we just got to hope that no bad news comes out of camp, because if no bad news comes out of camp, I like the makeup of this roster to put them in position to be competitive all season and fight for a playoff spot when it's all said and done.
Someone in the chat mentions nobody's really even talked about Noelvi. Noelvi shouldn't be talked about as of this very second. I don't, like Jacob said, I mean, this isn't a guy that you have a lot of optimism is going to be a game changer this year. But I will say this, if he does turn out to be the player he was from a while ago, what was it, 2 years ago now?
Yeah.
If he turns out to be that player, then this is a completely different story. This team is going to exceed all of our expectations if that's the case. So I'm cheering for him, I'm rooting for him. It's just a little bit silly to expect anything from Noelvi Marte when last year you saw what he was, and what he was a truly horrific baseball player. If he can get back to where he was before the juice, great. I'm happy for him. I'd love it. But again, I don't trust him right now.
He won't be on the opening day roster, right?
Depends how he does this spring. He played bad during the winter. He's played bad during the spring. He's played bad for almost a year and a half straight since the juice. So I don't know how he's just going to improve in a 30 game stretch or 30-day stretch in March. I could be wrong on that, and I hope I am.
I also don't know with what we saw last year, is a good spring training enough for him to earn a roster spot? Or should he have to go down to AAA and show that he can hit consistently for a little bit?
I mean, if he's tearing,
we have bodies.
Yeah, no. If he's tearing the cover off the ball, I don't see a reason for him not to be on the roster.
I mean, he'd have to be playing like he was playing when he came up 2 years ago. It's not just like he looks okay, he's on the roster. That's more what I mean.
Yeah, you're right.
Last week when Reed filled in, I know he put out his top 5 most important players for the Reds, and Jamie Candelario obviously coming on that list. I think he came in at number 4 on his list. Where do you rank Candelario as far as one of the most important Reds for this upcoming season? How high up that list do you rank him when it comes to Candelario?
Pretty high. He is that big signing that we've wanted for a while. They went out and got him last year. I think it's $15 million a year, and that's big money for the Reds in free agency. So if he can go be that player we brought him in to be last year, that'll be absolutely crucial for the Reds. If he can play third base every day and be a 30 home run guy, that'd be absolutely awesome for the Reds. Now, if he's not going to stay healthy, then you have to start looking at guys like Gavin Lux and if Noelvi Marte can come on, and that puts the Reds in a tough spot. And if he can't run again and you have to DH him every day, that continues to put the Reds in a tough spot. So I think Jeimer Candelario staying healthy and playing up to what he was supposed to be in Cincinnati is, if not the most important, certainly up there for the Reds' success this year.
Last year was the worst, and by far, by the way, it was the worst season of his major league career. His career started in 2016 with the Cubs. Since then, he's been a pretty solid baseball player. Last year, disaster, a lot because of the injury. So I'm going to say that if he's able to replicate some of those years with Detroit, then I'm going to love our chances, because I think that he has the ability to hit home runs. He hit 20 home runs in 112 games last year, 56 RBIs. I think the guy's good. He has to get on base. I mean, a 279 OBP is woeful.
Yeah.
But if he gets on base, if he's able to show a little bit of power, if he's able to be that power bat that we're all looking for, then great. Yeah, I think he's one of the more important pieces too. Every player has, and this is just pretty much based on the fact that we don't have any room for error here. Every player is very important. Like, there's not a player that we can just skate by with having a so-so player. Spencer Steer has to be the guy that we've seen the past few years. If this injury carries into the season and he's not good offensively whatsoever, he can't be on the roster. Like, that's just the nature of this right now. The right field position is the only thing where I have serious doubts about what's going on out there. And maybe Austin Hayes can clean it up. Maybe Jake Fraley's going to be that guy that I believe in. I think Jake Fraley's that guy. Maybe Will Benson's back. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be. But Jeimer Candelario is a guy is he the highest paid player on the team? Second highest paid player?
Certainly close.
Behind Nick Martinez. So, yeah, he's vital. He's vital to the team.
Yeah, I think he's very vital, and that's why I brought this up, because if he has the season that we anticipated him to have last year, and obviously coming into camp, obviously in very good shape, and Francona seems very high on him right now in the early goings as well. If we get stability, obviously you know who you have in McLain and Ellie at second and short. Christian Encarnacion Strand, not concerned, but still need to see more proof and evidence that he's going to be a stable force at first base. If the Reds can get some consistency and stability at the corners in the infield, I think that's ginormous, because then it closes some things off. You know who your first baseman is. You're getting production from him. Obviously, production from your third baseman and Candelario. I think Candelario solves a lot of problems for this team, because you know who your second baseman is and shortstop is, obviously, but at third base, if they can securely know that he is their guy, that is their third baseman. Now we're not talking as much about Noelvi Marte. Now we're just talking about the usage of Lux and others as far as depth is concerned, and just maneuvering the lineup a little bit. I think once the Reds start to check off boxes of getting answers as far as who their stable guys are, if Candelario's that with Ellie and McLain, obviously Tyler Stevenson's your catcher, so you're locked in there. I think they just need to get more locked in pieces, and I think he's the key to that. I put him very high up on that list, because if he's not very good and he is questionable, it's just now we're having way too many questions about multiple positions, and I think it's going to be hard to win the division or compete for the playoffs if you have way too many holes in that middle infield. And I think if he has a big year and he's their guy, that checks off a lot of boxes and provides that stability that this team desperately needs. So I think that's going to be key as well.
I think, as you said right there, if the better Jeimer Candelario is, the less people are talking about Noelvi Marte, and that gives him a much better chance to succeed without a magnifying glass on him. And however good Jeimer's going to be this year, the best chance for the Reds to have long-term success is for Noelvi Marte to figure it out. So if Jeimer can be good this year and Noelvi can, go on the back burner and figure some things out on his own and be ready to go, maybe next year or even later in this year, if this team is a playoff team, if he's ready to go by, September and we're calling him up for a playoff run and he's back to at least a form of his old self, that's another huge positive that you can get from Candelario being great. So the ripple effects of the guys that are supposed to be good being good this year go all the way down throughout the Reds organization. And I think it could really help this team long term if the guys that we've asked to be everyday players can actually be everyday players.
Last thing here, and then I want to get there's a clip from Francona that we want to touch on shortly, but I want to bring up, to me, another player that I think is very vital is going to come from the rotation this time. Look, we now know you get with Hunter Greene. He's a Cy Young caliber pitcher, no doubt about it. But I think this one of the top most important players on this roster has to be Nick Lodolo. I think that Nick Lodolo, is the difference between a team that's going to be fighting for a wild card and a team that can win the division. Because I think if Hunter Greene continues pitching the way we saw him, we saw him kind of break out last year. We've seen glimpses of it, but last year was that breakout year for Hunter Greene. If Lodolo stays healthy and has that Lodolo in the early goings of the last 2 years has just looked phenomenal. It's just been the durability factor and his ability to stay healthy that's been a question mark. But if Lodolo complements Hunter Greene and the Reds have a dominant 1-2 punch at the top of that rotation, that's how you're going to win a lot of series throughout this season. When you have Hunter Greene and Nick Lodolo in back-to-back outings, and then, of course, the complementary pieces in that rotation of obviously Andrew Abbott, you get Brady Singer in the offseason, whether it's Nick Martinez or Rhett Lowder or whoever. I think for the Reds to just be a team that's, kind of screwing around and competing for one of the final wild card spots, being that team or actually going to be a true contender to win this division, I think it all comes down to Nick Lodolo in that rotation, because you know what you get every 5 days with Hunter Greene. But if you can have a Hunter Greene / Nick Lodolo back-to-back outings every series, That's how you're going to win a lot of series. That's how you're going to win a lot of games, and that's how you're going to compete to win this division. We talked about Candelario, but I think the second most important player, maybe the most important player in my eyes, has to be Nick Lodolo in that regards. For this team to be a true division contender, I think you need a strong 1-2 punch. It can't be Hunter Greene and then complementary pitching throughout the rest of the rotation. I think to be a legitimate team to win this division, it has to be a dominant 1-2 punch. Hunter Greene and Nick Lodolo. Nick Lodolo, I think, is the key to the success as well for the Reds this season.
I think it's everyone but Hunter Greene. I mean, I think you could easily say Andrew Abbott as well. He's been great to start years and has fallen off towards the end. Rhett Lowder, if he can be what he was for the last however many starts last year, it's great. It's the same reason I don't put Ellie as the number one thing in the Reds' offense on the offensive side of the ball or defensive side of the ball, that to be the most important player, because I like to think I know what I'm getting out of him. Yeah. So it's everyone else that has to pull their weight for this team to exceed expectations. And now I think it's the same with the pitching staff. I'm uber confident in Hunter Greene being a Cy Young candidate and an ace from start to finish this year. Now, obviously, injuries could come into play, and that would be a nightmare, but I'm so confident in what Hunter Greene's going to be able to do on the mound that he's so far back in my mind in terms of things to worry about that, yeah, I'm 100% focused on what Nick Lodolo can do consistently. Is Brady Singer going to be the step up that we want him to be? Can Graham Ashcraft be a better reliever than he was starter? I think there's a ton of questions on the pitching staff that could really jolt this team forward, and I just think the confidence in what Hunter Greene's able to do just moves him down the list and therefore bumps everyone else up.
Yeah, Nick Lodolo is a guy that I've had serious doubts about, so I'm not going to sit here and say too much about him. All I'll say is when he's on, he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. His stuff's absurd. He just has to be healthy. And we're at a point now where if he does get hurt this year for a significant amount of time, that's a guy you just can't trust. At some point, Nick Senzel is a guy you can't trust. He's just not that good. So I'm going to hope that Nick Lodolo is going to be healthy, he's going to be available, and he's going to fight through it this year, and he's going to be that bona fide ace that we thought he could be. I don't know if he will be, and I think Rhett Lowder is a bigger X factor right now than Nick Lodolo, at least in my mind. And not that I'm ruling Nick Lodolo out. I'm not saying that. I trust Rhett Lowder up until this point more than I trust Nick Lodolo.
Oh, and that's fair. It's from a trust standpoint, and that's funny too because we've seen 1 month of Rhett Lowder, and I agree with you. Like I feel pretty good. I put it this way: if Rhett Lowder, and assuming that again he gets back on that regular throwing program and there's no restrictions, and that elbow was just a slight, just a little, tightness, and he's fine the rest of the way. If Rhett Lowder is not in the rotation on opening day, I view that as a good thing. And what I mean by that is, assuming if he's not in the rotation on opening day, not due to injury, I find that to be a good thing, because if he's injured and out, that's a problem. But if he's not in the rotation on opening day, that means that everyone else has showed out throughout spring training and that there's just not enough room for him. And that's a good problem to have. Depth is a good problem to have if that's the case, and that's how I view that. But Elliot, I agree. I just didn't move him up the list that high just because we've only seen 1 month. But, man, if he is that guy, then to be fair, you have Hunter Greene. Whoever the second punch is, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's obviously Andrew Abbott that steps up and he's that dominant second punch in the rotation. But for the Reds to be a true contender, I think they need a second pitcher in that rotation that is going to be as dominant as Hunter Greene to provide them that dominant 1-2 punch.